The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Ashworth mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floors. William Ashworth, heir to one of the country's most prominent business empires, stood in his study reviewing quarterly reports when his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus, the head of household security.
"Sir, we need to speak privately. It's regarding Mrs. W. Camilla."
William's jaw tightened. His stepmother Camilla had married his father 3 years ago, shortly after his mother's passing. The marriage had been swift, almost suspiciously so, and William had never fully trusted her motivations. His father, grief-stricken and vulnerable, had been an easy target for someone with Camilla's charm and calculated grace. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of concern. At 62, Marcus had served the Ashworth family for over 2 decades, and William trusted his judgment implicitly. "What is it, Marcus?" William asked, closing his laptop. "During the routine security sweep of the estate, we discovered something unusual in the master bedroom," Marcus began, his voice lowering. "A sophisticated recording device hidden beneath the bed frame. It appears to have been there for months." The revelation hit William like a physical blow. His mind raced through the implications. Who would plant such a device? What conversations had been recorded? Most importantly, was his family's privacy and security compromised? "Show me," William demanded. They walked through the mansion's corridors, past portraits of previous generations of Ashworths who had built their fortune through steel manufacturing and real estate. Each face seemed to watch William with knowing eyes, as if they too suspected the truth about Camilla. In the master bedroom, Marcus pointed to a small area near the headboard. The device was expertly concealed, professional-grade equipment. Whoever placed it knew what they were doing. William examined the tiny recorder in Marcus's gloved hand. It was no bigger than a coin with advanced wireless capabilities. This wasn't some amateur attempt at eavesdropping. Someone had invested serious money in planning into this surveillance. "Has my father seen this?" William asked. "No, sir. I brought it directly to you. Given the circumstances surrounding your stepmother's rapid integration into the family, I thought you should be informed first." William's suspicions about Camilla suddenly seemed less like paranoia and more like intuition. From the beginning, something about her had felt orchestrated. Her chance meeting with his father at a charity gala, her immediate understanding of high society protocols, her seamless transition into their world. It all felt too convenient. "I want this analyzed immediately," William instructed. "Find out what's on it, how long it's been active, and if there are any other devices. And Marcus, keep this between us for now." As Marcus left with the device, William remained in the bedroom, studying the space with new eyes. How many private conversations between his father and Camilla had been recorded? How many family discussions about business matters, estate planning, and personal affairs had been captured? His phone rang. Camilla's name appeared on the screen. "William, darling," her voice purred through the speaker. "I was hoping we could have lunch today. There are some family matters I'd like to discuss with you." The timing felt too coincidental. Did she know about the discovery? Was this an attempt to gauge his knowledge or manipulate the situation? Of course, Camilla. The garden terrace at 1 o'clock? Perfect. I'll see you then. As William ended the call, he realized this lunch would be unlike any other. Armed with the knowledge of the hidden recorder, he would be watching Camilla's every word and gesture for signs of deception. The game between them was about to change dramatically. The next few hours would determine whether Camilla was merely an opportunistic woman who had married into wealth or something far more dangerous, a sophisticated operative working to infiltrate and possibly destroy the Ashworth family from within. William spent the remaining morning preparing for what might be the most important conversation of his life. He reviewed everything he knew about Camilla's background, her supposed career as an art dealer, her claims about her family's history in Europe. Every detail would now be scrutinized through the lens of potential deception. The mansion's clock tower chimed 12:30 and William made his way to the garden terrace. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either clear the air or shatter the fragile peace that had existed in the Ashworth household since his father's remarriage. Camilla was already seated at the wrought iron table, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the afternoon light. She wore a cream-colored dress that spoke of expensive taste and careful attention to appearance. To any observer, she looked like the picture of refined elegance. But William now saw her through different eyes. "You look troubled, William," she observed as he approached. "Is everything all right?" Her ability to read people had always impressed and unnerved him. Today, it felt particularly ominous. "Just business matters," William replied, taking his seat across from her. "You mentioned family matters you wanted to discuss." Camilla smiled, but William noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've been thinking about your father's health lately. He's been under so much stress with the company expansion. I worry about him." The comment struck William as calculated. His father had indeed been dealing with significant business pressures, but these were private matters that shouldn't have been common knowledge outside the immediate family and trusted advisors. "What specifically concerns you?" William asked, testing her knowledge. "The Singapore project has been keeping him awake at night, and there's been tension with the board members about the new acquisition strategy." William's blood ran cold. The Singapore project was confidential information, discussed only in private family meetings and executive sessions. The board tensions were even more sensitive, involving potential challenges to his father's leadership. How could Camilla know these details unless she had been listening to private conversations? The hidden recorders suddenly made perfect sense. "I wasn't aware you were so involved in father's business affairs," William said carefully. "A wife notices these things?" Camilla replied smoothly. "Richard shares his burdens with me. It's natural in a marriage." But William knew his father's character. Richard Ashworth was old school, protective of business information, unlikely to discuss sensitive corporate matters with anyone outside the company's inner circle. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the picture they formed was deeply disturbing. The lunch continued with polite conversation, but underneath the surface, William felt the tension building. Every word Camilla spoke seemed to confirm his growing suspicions. She knew too much, understood too many nuances of family dynamics and business operations for someone who had only been part of their lives for 3 years. As they finished their meal, William made a decision. The confrontation was inevitable, but it needed to happen in a controlled environment, away from his father's potential interference, and with proper evidence in hand. "Camilla, I'd like to continue our conversation later. Perhaps we could meet in my study this evening? There are some family matters I'd like to discuss as well." Her eyes flashed with something: surprise, calculation, or perhaps recognition that the game was shifting. "Of course, William. Shall we say 8 o'clock? As Camilla left the terrace, William watched her carefully composed movements, the way she held herself with perfect posture even when she thought no one was observing. Everything about her seemed rehearsed, professional, deliberate. The evening ahead would bring answers, but William suspected those answers would change everything about his understanding of his family's situation and the woman who had so quickly become central to their lives. The hours between lunch and the evening meeting felt like an eternity to William. He spent the time in his study, doors locked, reviewing the preliminary analysis Marcus had managed to obtain from the recording device. What he discovered made his stomach churn with a mixture of anger and betrayal. The device had been active for nearly 18 months, capturing hundreds of hours of private conversations. The recordings included intimate discussions between his father and Camilla, family meetings about estate planning, confidential business calls, and personal moments that should never have been documented. More disturbing was the sophisticated nature of the equipment. This wasn't available to ordinary consumers. The device had encrypted transmission capabilities, suggesting the recordings were being sent to external recipients in real time. Someone had been systematically gathering intelligence on the Ashworth family for over a year. Marcus knocked softly on the study door. "Sir, I have additional information." William let him in, noting the grim expression on the older man's face. "The technical analysis revealed something troubling," Marcus began. "The device has GPS tracking and remote activation capabilities. Whoever planted it has been able to monitor not just conversations, but also movements within the house. They know when rooms are occupied, when family members are present, everything." "Have you found any other devices?" "We're conducting a comprehensive sweep now, but given the sophistication of this equipment, there could be others we haven't detected yet." "Sir, I must ask, are you certain you want to confront Camilla directly? If she's part of some larger operation, alerting her could be dangerous." William considered the warning. Marcus was right to be cautious, but William felt compelled to face Camilla directly. He needed to look her in the eyes when he revealed what they knew, He needed to understand who she really was and what she wanted from his family. I'll be careful, Marcus, but I need answers. And I believe a direct confrontation is the best way to get them. Very well, sir. I'll position security discreetly around the study. If you need assistance, just press the emergency button on your desk. As evening approached, William prepared for what would likely be the most intense conversation of his life. He arranged the study carefully, ensuring the recording device was prominently displayed on his desk where Camilla couldn't miss it. He also activated his own recording system. If Camilla was going to provide explanations, he wanted everything documented. At precisely 8 o'clock, Camilla knocked on the study door. William called for her to enter, and she stepped inside with her characteristic grace and poise. She wore a navy blue evening dress and pearls, looking every inch the sophisticated woman who belonged in high society. "You wanted to discuss family matters?" she asked, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "Indeed," William replied, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "I'm particularly interested in discussing privacy and trust within our family." Camilla tilted her head slightly, a gesture William had once found charming, but now recognized as a calculated mannerism designed to appear innocent and attentive. "Those are certainly important values," she agreed. "Your father has always emphasized the importance of family loyalty." "Has he?" William leaned forward. "Because I've been wondering about loyalty myself. About what it means to be part of a family, to be trusted with intimate details of people's lives." Something flickered in Camilla's eyes. The slightest tension appeared in her shoulders. "I'm not sure I follow your meaning, William." "Don't you?" William picked up the recording device from his desk, holding it up so she could see it clearly. "This was found hidden in my father's bedroom. Professional-grade surveillance equipment. It's been recording private conversations for over 18 months. The transformation in Camilla's demeanor was immediate and startling. The gentle, refined woman vanished, replaced by someone with sharp, calculating eyes and a posture that suggested she was ready for confrontation rather than conversation. "I see," she said simply. "Is that all you have to say?" "I see?" William's voice rose slightly. "This device has been documenting our family's most private moments. Our business discussions. Someone has been systematically violating our privacy and trust." Camilla was silent for a long moment, studying William's face as if evaluating her options. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. Gone was the soft, cultured tone she usually employed. This voice was crisp, professional, direct. "What exactly do you want from me, William?" "I want the truth. I want to know who you really are, why you're here, and what you want from our family." "The truth," she repeated, almost smiling. "The truth is rarely as simple as people want it to be. Try me." Camilla stood and walked to the window, looking out at the estate grounds. In the evening light, her reflection in the glass showed a woman who looked familiar yet completely different from the stepmother William thought he knew. "My name is Camilla, but not Camilla Morrison as you know me. I'm Camilla Harrison, and I work for a private intelligence firm that specializes in corporate espionage and asset recovery." The admission hit William like a physical blow, even though he had suspected something similar. Hearing it confirmed made the betrayal real in a way that mere suspicion hadn't. "You're a spy. I'm an intelligence professional. There's a difference." "Not from where I'm sitting. You married my father under false pretenses. You've been living in our house, sharing his bed, pretending to care about him, while stealing our secrets. What's the difference?" Camilla turned from the window. "The difference is that I never intended for it to go this far. The difference is that I've grown to genuinely care about Richard, despite my professional obligations." "Your professional obligations?" William's voice was incredulous. "What professional obligations require you to seduce a grieving widower and infiltrate his family?" "It's complicated, William. When I took this assignment, it was supposed to be straightforward corporate intelligence gathering. Your father's company was involved in some questionable business practices, and my clients needed documentation to protect their interests." "What questionable practices? What clients?" Camilla hesitated. "I can't reveal everything, but there were concerns about illegal financial transfers, tax evasion schemes, and potentially dangerous business partnerships with individuals involved in money laundering." William felt the ground shifting beneath him. "That's impossible. My father is one of the most ethical businessmen I know." is he? Or is that what you've chosen to believe because it's easier than accepting that the man who raised you might have compromises you never suspected? The question hung in the air between them. William realized that everything he thought he understood about this situation might be wrong. Was Camilla a villain who had infiltrated their family for nefarious purposes, or was she an investigator who had uncovered genuinely problematic behavior? Even if that were true, William said slowly, it doesn't justify what you've done. The deception, the violation of privacy, the manipulation of my father's emotions. You're right. It doesn't justify everything. But William, there are things about your family's business operations that you don't know. Things that could destroy not just your father's reputation, but potentially land him in prison. The words hit William like ice water. Prison? His father, Richard Ashworth, a pillar of the community, a man who had built his fortune through decades of hard work and careful business practices? I don't believe you. I can prove it. The recordings contain conversations you haven't heard yet. Discussions about offshore accounts, falsified documents, payments to individuals with connections to organized crime. Your father has been living a double life, William, and I'm not the only one who knows about it. William sank back in his chair, feeling overwhelmed by the implications of what Camilla was telling him. If she was lying, she was an incredibly sophisticated manipulator. If she was telling the truth, his entire understanding of his family and their business was built on false foundations. Why should I trust anything you say? You've been lying to us for years. Because, Camilla said, returning to her seat and looking directly into his eyes, I'm about to show you evidence that will change everything you think you know about your father. And because, despite everything, I've come to care about this family enough to try to protect you from what's coming. She reached into her purse and pulled out a tablet computer. The recordings on that device are just the beginning, William. What I'm about to show you will explain why I'm here and why your family is in more danger than you realize. As Camilla activated the tablet, William realized that this conversation was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, and the revelations ahead would challenge everything he had believed about his family, his father, and the woman who had so completely disrupted their lives. William stared at the tablet screen as Camilla navigated through a series of encrypted files. His mind was reeling from her revelations, but he forced himself to focus on what she was showing him. The documents appeared to be financial records, email communications, and what looked like surveillance photos. Before you see this, Camilla said quietly, I need you to understand that I never wanted it to come to this. When I accepted this assignment 3 years ago, I expected to gather evidence, compile a report, and leave. I never expected to fall in love with your father or to care about you as if you were my actual stepson. But you did accept the assignment, William replied coldly. You chose to deceive us. Yes, I did, and I've been paying the price for that decision every day since. She touched the tablet screen. These are financial records from your father's company over the past 5 years. Notice the pattern of transfers to these offshore accounts. William studied the numbers, trying to process what he was seeing. Large sums of money were being moved through a complex network of shell companies and foreign banks. The amounts were staggering, tens of millions of dollars that seemed to disappear into untraceable accounts. This could be legitimate international business, William protested. We have operations in dozens of countries. Look at the recipients, Camilla said, scrolling to another screen. These shell companies don't exist in any real capacity. They're fronts for money laundering operations connected to a criminal organization based in Eastern Europe. The names on the screen meant nothing to William, but the amounts and frequency of transfers painted a disturbing picture. If Camilla was correct, his father had been systematically moving company funds through illegal channels for years. This doesn't prove anything, William said, though his confidence was wavering. Documents can be falsified. These are email communications between your father and a man named Viktor Kozlov. Kozlov is wanted by Interpol for his involvement in human trafficking and arms dealing. Your father has been providing financial services for Kozlov's organization. William read the emails with growing horror. The communications were definitely in his father's writing style, discussing special projects and alternative payment methods in language that seemed designed to avoid explicit admission of illegal activity while clearly coordinating criminal financial transactions. My father would never, William began. but his voice trailed off as he recognized specific phrases and mannerisms that were distinctly his father's. "I'm sorry, William. I know this is devastating to hear, but there's more." She showed him photographs taken with telephoto lenses, showing his father meeting with individuals in shadowy locations, parking garages, remote restaurants, private clubs. The images were time-stamped and clearly showed Richard Ashworth engaged in clandestine meetings with people who looked nothing like legitimate business associates. "Who took these pictures?" William asked. "My employers, initially, but also law enforcement agencies in 3 different countries. William, your father is under active investigation by multiple international authorities. It's not a matter of if he'll be arrested. It's a matter of when." The room seemed to spin around William. Everything he had believed about his family's success, his father's integrity, his own future was crumbling before his eyes. The Ashworth fortune, built over generations, was apparently founded on criminal enterprises. Why hasn't he been arrested already? Because he's been very careful, and because the authorities want to build an airtight case. They're also hoping he'll lead them to bigger targets, people higher up in the criminal organizations he's been serving. William slumped in his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was learning. "And you? What's your role in all this?" "Initially, I was hired by a consortium of legitimate businesses who suspected your father's company was being used to launder money that was directly competing with their operations. They wanted evidence to present to authorities. But as the investigation deepened, I was asked to maintain my position to continue gathering intelligence." "By whom?" "Who exactly do you work for?" Camilla hesitated. "I can't reveal all the details, but I work for a private intelligence firm that frequently contracts with government agencies. Some of my current instructions come from federal law enforcement. You're working with the FBI?" "Among others. The investigation has international implications, so multiple agencies are involved." William felt a surge of anger. "So our entire family has been under surveillance, not just by you, but by federal agents?" "William, you have to understand, your father's activities have potentially funded human trafficking operations, arms deals, and other violent crimes. The authorities needed someone on the inside to document his involvement and identify his criminal associates." "And you volunteered to seduce him?" The question hit Camilla visibly. For the first time in their conversation, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. "That aspect of the assignment was more complicated than I anticipated. I was supposed to get close enough to gather intelligence. I wasn't supposed to actually fall in love with him." "But you did." "Yes. Despite everything I knew about his business activities, despite my professional obligations, I came to love Richard. He's charming, intelligent, and when he's not conducting criminal business, he's genuinely kind and caring. That's what made this assignment so difficult." William studied Camilla's face, trying to determine if this emotional vulnerability was genuine or another layer of manipulation. "If you love him, why didn't you warn him? Why didn't you try to get him to stop his criminal activities?" "I tried, indirectly. I encouraged him to retire, to focus on legitimate business operations, to distance himself from his more questionable associates. But the criminal organization he's involved with doesn't allow people to simply walk away, and my handlers made it clear that any attempt to directly interfere with the investigation would result in charges against me as well." "So you've been trapped. We've all been trapped. Your father by his criminal associates. Me by my professional obligations and the knowledge that backing out could make things worse for everyone. And you by circumstances you never chose and never understood." William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the estate grounds where he had grown up believing he was part of a respectable family legacy. "What happens now?" "That depends partly on you," Camilla said. "The authorities know that you've been unaware of your father's criminal activities. You're not considered a target of the investigation, but they need to know whether you're going to be cooperative or try to protect your father when arrests are made. When will that happen?" "Soon. Probably within the next few weeks. There's been pressure to move quickly because intelligence suggests that your father's criminal associates are planning something significant, possibly a major money laundering operation that would fund serious violent crimes." William turned back to face Camilla. "And what about you? What happens to you when this is all over?" "I don't know. I'll have to testify in multiple criminal proceedings." After that, I'll probably have to enter witness protection. People in Viktor Kozlov's organization don't forgive betrayal, even by federal agents. So you'll disappear? Most likely, unless... She paused, looking uncertain for the first time in their conversation. Unless what? Unless your father cooperates with authorities and helps them dismantle the criminal organization. If he provides substantial assistance, there might be possibilities for plea agreements, reduced sentences, protection for family members. William felt a glimmer of hope amid the devastation. You think he might cooperate? I think he loves you enough to consider it, and I think he's grown tired of the stress and danger of his double life. But William, you need to understand, even if he cooperates, his reputation will be destroyed, the family business will likely be dismantled, and he'll probably serve some prison time. The weight of the decision ahead was overwhelming. William realized that he would have to choose between protecting his father's secrets and helping bring his father's criminal activities to justice. Either choice would destroy the life he had known. I need time to process all this, William said. I understand. But William, time is the one thing we don't have much of. The investigation is moving forward with or without your cooperation. The question is whether you'll be part of the solution or another casualty of your father's choices. As Camilla gathered her tablet and prepared to leave, William realized that their conversation was far from over. The revelations of the evening had answered some questions but raised many others. Most importantly, he still had to decide what to do with the devastating knowledge he had gained about his father, his family, and the woman who had infiltrated their lives with such complex motives. Camilla, he called as she reached the door. Yes? Do you really love him? She was quiet for a long moment. Yes, William. That's what makes this so much harder than it should be. I love him, I love you as family, and I hate what I've had to do to both of you. But I can't change the choices that brought us to this point. After she left, William remained in his study, staring at the recording device that had started this whole confrontation. Tomorrow, he would have to decide whether to confront his father directly or contact the federal agents who were apparently coordinating the investigation. Either way, the Ashworth family, as he had known it, was about to cease to exist. The next morning arrived gray and cold, matching William's emotional state. He had barely slept, spending most of the night wrestling with the impossible decision before him. The evidence Camilla had shown him was compelling, but part of him still hoped there might be some explanation that would preserve his faith in his father's integrity. He found Richard Ashworth in the breakfast room, reading financial newspapers and reviewing documents that now seemed ominous in light of the previous evening's revelations. His father looked older than his 68 years, with worry lines that William had attributed to business stress but now suspected might be related to far more serious concerns. "Good morning, son," Richard said without looking up from his papers. "You're up early. I couldn't sleep." William poured himself coffee and sat across from his father. "I've been thinking about some family matters." "Oh? Anything I can help with?" William studied his father's face, searching for signs of the criminal behavior Camilla had described. Richard Ashworth looked like what he had always been to William, a successful businessman, a loving father, a pillar of their community. It seemed impossible that this man could be involved in money laundering and criminal enterprises. "Father, I need to ask you about some business operations I don't understand." Richard's attention sharpened slightly. "What operations?" "The international transfers, the offshore accounts, some of the clients and partners I've noticed in the company files." The change in his father's demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. His shoulders tensed, and his eyes became more guarded. "William, there are aspects of international business that are complex. Not everything needs to be discussed in detail. But I'm supposed to inherit this company. Shouldn't I understand all aspects of how it operates? In time, yes. But some matters are sensitive and require careful handling." William felt his heart sinking. His father's evasive responses were confirming Camilla's allegations rather than refuting them. Sensitive how? What kind of careful handling? Richard set down his newspaper and looked directly at his son. "William, why are you asking these questions? Has something happened?" The moment of truth had arrived. William could continue probing indirectly, or he could confront his father with what he knew. He thought about Camilla's warning that time was running short, that federal agents were preparing to make arrests. "I found the recording device in your bedroom. The words hung in the air between them. Richard's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, then a dawning understanding that seemed to age him visibly. What recording device? The one that's been documenting your private conversations for the past 18 months. The one that captured discussions about offshore accounts, criminal associates, and money laundering operations. Richard closed his eyes and was silent for a long moment. When he opened them, William saw something he had never seen before in his father's expression: defeat.
I see, Richard said quietly. Is it true? Are you involved with criminals? Have you been laundering money through the company? Richard stood and walked to the window, his movements showing every one of his years.
How much do you know? I know about Viktor Kozlov. I know about the shell companies. I know about the federal investigation. William paused. And I know that Camilla isn't who we thought she was. Richard turned back to his son. She told you? She's a federal agent, isn't she? Or working for them? Something like that. I've suspected for months that she wasn't simply the art dealer she claimed to be. Her questions were too informed, her understanding of business operations too sophisticated. But you didn't confront her. Richard sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted, because I was hoping I was wrong. And because... He paused, struggling with the admission. Because I had fallen in love with her, despite my suspicions. William felt a complex mix of emotions: sympathy for his father's emotional vulnerability and anger at the deception that had engulfed their family. So it's all true? The criminal activities? Richard was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It started small, William. A few questionable transactions to help the company through a difficult period. I told myself it was temporary, that I would extricate us as soon as possible. But you didn't. I couldn't. Once you're involved with people like Viktor Kozlov, they don't let you walk away. The amounts grew larger, the activities more dangerous, and I became trapped in a web I couldn't escape. William felt his worldview continuing to crumble. How long? How long has this been going on? About 7 years. It began shortly after your mother's diagnosis, when the medical expenses and business pressures were overwhelming everything. The revelation that his mother's illness had been connected to his father's criminal activities was devastating. William realized that even his memories of her final years were now tainted by the knowledge of what his father had been doing to pay for her care. Did she know? No. I made sure she never knew. She died believing I was the man she had always thought I was. But you're not that man. Richard met his son's eyes. No, I'm not. I haven't been for years. And I've been living with the guilt and fear every day since. William struggled to process the magnitude of his father's confession. The man who had raised him, taught him about integrity and hard work, had been living a lie for years. What about me? Was I ever meant to actually inherit the company, or was I just cover for criminal operations? You were always my son, William. Everything I've done, including the criminal activities, was motivated by my desire to provide for you and secure your future. By destroying our family's reputation and putting us all at risk? I know how it sounds. I know how wrong it's been. But at each step, I told myself I was protecting what we had built. William stood and began pacing. Camilla says arrests are coming soon. She says you could cooperate with authorities, help them dismantle the criminal organization, and spend the rest of my life in prison. Maybe not. If you help them, if you provide substantial assistance, there might be plea agreements, reduced sentences. Richard considered this. What does Camilla recommend? She thinks you're tired of the criminal life. She thinks you might cooperate if it meant protecting me and potentially reducing your sentence. She's right about my being tired, living in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when it would all collapse. It's been exhausting. Then cooperate. Help them stop Viktor Kozlov and his organization. Richard looked at his son with a mixture of love and regret. If I do that, William, everything changes. The family name will be destroyed. The company will be dismantled. You'll inherit nothing but scandal and debt. I'd rather have a father who's trying to make things right than a father who's living a lie. The simple statement seemed to hit Richard with tremendous force. For the first time in their conversation, he looked hopeful. You would stand by me? Even after everything you've learned? I don't approve of what you've done. I'm angry and disappointed and confused. But you're still my father. If you're willing to try to make things right, then we'll figure out how to move forward." Richard stood and embraced his son. "I've been wanting to end this for years, but I didn't know how. Maybe this is how. What about Camilla? How do we handle the fact that she's been lying to both of us?" "I think," Richard said slowly, "that Camilla has been caught in the same trap I have. She accepted an assignment that became more complicated than anyone expected. The question is whether she can help us navigate what comes next." William realized that the conversation that had started as a confrontation about betrayal and deception was becoming something else. A family planning session about how to deal with an impossible situation with whatever dignity and integrity they could salvage. Should we call her? Ask her to help us contact the federal agents? I think we should. But William, you need to understand that once we start down this path, there's no going back. Everything about our lives will change. Everything about our lives has already changed, Father. We just didn't know it yet. Richard nodded, accepting the truth of his son's words. Then let's try to change it in the right direction. As they prepared to contact Camilla and begin the process of cooperation with federal authorities, William realized that the most difficult conversations were still ahead of them. But for the first time since discovering the recording device, he felt hopeful that their family might survive this crisis with their relationships intact, even if everything else was lost. Part 5. The federal building in downtown was imposing and cold, its granite facade reflecting the gray November sky. William sat beside his father and Camilla in a sterile conference room, surrounded by attorneys, FBI agents, and federal prosecutors who would determine the fate of the Ashworth family. It had been 3 weeks since the confrontation in William's study. 3 weeks of preparation, negotiation, and difficult decisions. Richard had agreed to full cooperation with the federal investigation, providing detailed information about his money laundering activities and his connections to Viktor Kozlov's criminal organization. Agent Sarah Chen, the lead federal investigator, reviewed the cooperation agreement one final time. "This is the book. It's about history. Ashworth, you understand that your testimony will be crucial to our case against Kozlov and his associates. You'll be required to wear recording devices during future meetings, provide access to all financial records, and testify in multiple criminal proceedings." "I understand," Richard replied. His voice was steady, but William could see the toll the past weeks had taken on his father. Richard had lost weight, aged visibly, and carried himself with the bearing of a man who knew his reputation was permanently destroyed. "And you understand the risks? Kozlov's organization has a history of violence against those who cooperate with authorities. I understand that as well." Agent Chen turned to Camilla. "Agent Harrison, your work on this case has been exceptional. The intelligence you've gathered has been invaluable in building our case." William still struggled with referring to Camilla as Agent Harrison. The woman he had known as his stepmother remained a complex figure in his mind, part federal agent, part family member, part stranger. Her true identity would always be complicated by the genuine relationships she had formed during her undercover assignment. "What's the timeline for arrests?" William asked. "We'll be moving against Kozlov's organization within the next 72 hours, Agent Chen replied. "We have coordinated operations planned in 6 countries. Your father's information has helped us identify key players and financial networks that we couldn't have reached otherwise." Richard spoke up. "What about protection for my family? Kozlov's people will assume that William knew about my activities. We've arranged for protective custody during the initial arrests. After that, we'll assess the ongoing threat level and determine what long-term security measures are necessary." William realized that their old life was truly over. Even if the criminal prosecutions were successful, even if his father received a reduced sentence for his cooperation, the Ashworth family would never again enjoy the privacy and security they had once taken for granted. "What happens to the company?" William asked. The federal prosecutor, a stern woman named Rebecca Martinez, answered. "The business assets used in money laundering operations will be forfeited to the government. The legitimate portions of the company may be salvageable, but that will depend on the extent of criminal involvement in day-to-day operations." "In other words," William said, "there may not be anything left to inherit." "That's possible. I'm sorry." William had already begun to accept this reality. The Ashworth fortune built over generations would likely be dismantled to compensate victims of the criminal activities his father had facilitated. He would have to build his own life without the financial advantages he had grown up expecting. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, then looked up with satisfaction. "We've just received confirmation. Kozlov has been arrested in Prague. The operation is proceeding successfully." A wave of relief passed through the room. For months, they had all been living with the knowledge that dangerous criminals were aware of the federal investigation. Viktor Kozlov's arrest meant that the immediate threat to the Ashworth family was significantly reduced. "What about the other associates?" Camilla asked. 17 arrests so far, across 6 countries. "We've also seized approximately $47 million in assets and closed down 12 shell companies. Your father's cooperation has been instrumental in achieving these results." Richard appeared both relieved and overwhelmed. "So it's over? The arrests are just the beginning," Agent Martinez explained. "The criminal proceedings will continue for months, possibly years. And, Mr. Ashworth, you'll be required to testify in each case." "What's his likely sentence?" William asked. "Given his cooperation and the valuable intelligence he's provided, we're recommending a sentence of 3 to 5 years in federal prison, with the possibility of early release for continued cooperation." 3 to 5 years. William had hoped the sentence might be shorter, but he understood that his father's crimes had serious consequences. People had been harmed by the money laundering operations Richard had facilitated. "When will the sentencing occur?" Richard asked. "Probably in 6 to 8 months after we complete the prosecution of the other defendants. Your cooperation will be a factor in the judge's decision." As the meeting concluded, William found himself alone with Camilla in the hallway while his father spoke privately with his attorney. "What happens to you now?" he asked. "I'll continue working on the prosecutions until they're complete. After that, I'm not sure. This assignment has lasted longer than anyone expected. Will you stay in contact? I know the circumstances were unusual, but you became part of our family, even if it started as an assignment." Camilla looked uncertain. "I'd like to, William, but it might be complicated given everything that's happened. What about my father? Do you think your feelings for him were real despite the professional circumstances?" "They were real. That's what made this so difficult. I genuinely care about both of you, despite the deception that brought us together." "Then don't disappear completely. When this is all over, when the legal proceedings are finished, stay in touch. We're going to need to rebuild our family, and despite everything, you've been part of that family." Camilla smiled, and for the first time in weeks, the expression looked genuinely warm rather than professionally calculated. "I'd like that." Richard emerged from his discussion with his attorney, looking exhausted but determined. "Are you ready to go home?" "Yes," William replied. "But it's not going to be the same home we left this morning." "No, it's not. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing." As they left the federal building, William realized that the confrontation that had started with a hidden recording device had led to the complete transformation of their family. His father would serve prison time. Their fortune would be largely forfeited. Their reputation in the community would never recover. But they had also escaped from a web of criminal activity that had been destroying Richard from within. They had chosen truth over deception, cooperation over continued criminality, and family loyalty over financial preservation. The Ashworth name would be associated with scandal, but also with a man who had ultimately chosen to do the right thing when given the opportunity. William could build a life on that foundation, even if he had to start from nothing. 6 months later, William visited his father in federal prison. Richard had adapted to incarceration better than anyone had expected, using his business skills to help other inmates with educational programs and maintaining his health through regular exercise and reading. "Any regrets?" William asked during their visit. "About the criminal activities?" "Every day." "About cooperating with the authorities?" "None at all. I sleep better now than I have in years. Camilla sends her regards. She's starting a new assignment, but she's staying in touch." Richard smiled. "I'm glad. Despite everything, I hope we can all remain family in some way." "We will. It just won't look like the family we used to be. Sometimes that's what's needed," Richard replied. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters." As William left the prison, He reflected on the truth of his father's words. The recording device hidden under the bed had exposed secrets that destroyed their old life but made possible something more honest and genuine. The confrontation with Camilla had revealed deceptions, but also genuine relationships worth preserving. The Ashworth family legacy would be complicated and controversial, but it would also be authentic. William could live with that and build something worthwhile from whatever remained when the legal proceedings were finally complete. The hidden recorder had captured the truth, and the truth, however painful, had ultimately set them free.